Looks like most of the attendees have joined now. We'll go ahead and get started. So thanks again, everybody, for joining today. My name is Kyle Sneerly. I'm the Director of Client Implementations here at Fleet Cost and Care. Before we kick off, I wanted to share a few housekeeping items about the webinar today. First of all, everyone will be on mute by default, so you can hear us, we can't hear you. There will be a Q&A or question and answer functionality within the Zoom webinar, so you can submit your questions and we will try to address those at the end of the session the best that we can. We're going to allot 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A at the end. So we are going to hold those questions till after the presentation is over. If we don't get to all of the questions that are asked today, we do have close to 200 attendees. We will follow up with everyone and make sure those questions are addressed in a timely fashion. And we'll also have a short survey once the webinar ends. It's 5 questions. If you could complete that, we'd really appreciate it. Your feedback's very valuable and helps us make sure that these presentations are as valuable as possible and you're getting the most out of them. Okay, so before I hand it over, we're going to just go through the agenda quickly here. Today, we're going to go over what WPF is and why it is important. Specifically as relates to our first WPF screen, that's the scheduled job screen. We're going to be talking about how to manage your jobs more effectively and some tips that will be important for you in this transition from the legacy screen or the current screen you're used to the new version that will be released shortly. Like I mentioned, there will be a Q&A session at the end, and this is the first part of 2 sessions. We will have another session following this to complete the training and the overview of the workflow and e-ticket management. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to David Thornton. David is our Senior Technical Product Manager here at Fleet Cost and Care. I'm sure a lot of you know him. He'll be going through and covering what WPF is in more detail and also have a live demonstration. So that said, David, go ahead and over to you.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. All right. So what is WPF? To put it as simply as possible, it makes the screen pretty. It does so much for the user experience that we were not able to achieve in WinForms. For those not familiar, WinForms was the technology that we've used throughout NexGen over the last 20+ years. But WPF brings in a lot of new functionality and capabilities, like better controls, better way of binding data for the database, the styles, templates, documents, the media, the text, typography. We've introduced spell check. There's just a ton of stuff that's coming with WPF. And why are we using the term WPF? Well, because I'm not that creative. WPF is actually a Microsoft term. It stands for Windows Presentation Foundation, and it was just the next logical step from WinForms. Next slide. Yeah. All right. With that, we will jump into the live demo. I will share my screen here. All right. So for those that haven't seen it yet, here's your first view of the new scheduled job screen with WPF technology. I'm sure most of you will notice that the content is virtually the same as what you have today, but the layout is going to be more streamlined. It's going to give a lot more user feedback as far as required fields, spelling, those types of details. As far as layout goes, I'll start with the header up here. The header is going to be consistent throughout most of our screens in NexGen as we migrate to WPF. And the intent of the header is to capture information that we want to persist across all the tabs of the screen. It's not displaying right now since I'm on a new job, but when I select a customer, it will display the customer name here. Let me just pick one here. And so you can see that the customer name appears up here along with the customer code for those that find that to be valuable. And with job sites, it's also going to show you what job site. So as you navigate through each of the different tabs, you're always going to have that information at hand. In addition, it's always going to capture the job dates and job times. And then you have additional controls up here. These are replacing what you are probably familiar with in the button toolbar. We've moved them onto the screen. The point of that was to simplify that experience when you have multiple screens open and you're not sure what that button toolbar is going to affect, screen A or screen B. Now you're going to know. The next section I want to highlight is the footer. The footer is at the bottom. This is going to house the job number. Once this job is saved, it'll show the job number and then the status of the job. Again, this footer is going to persist across all tabs, so you always know that information. In the middle, we have the content pane. The content pane is what will change as you move from tab to tab. And it's going to house all the data fields that you would put information in. And on the left-hand side here, we have the navigation bar or navigation menu. You can name it however you want, as long as we can come to an understanding of what you're calling it. And here we show the tab names, but we started with an iconography approach to simplify that user experience and get you looking at things instead of having to read things. So we start with the main tab, and that's the same thing as the main tab of the legacy scheduled job screen, but we refined it in that we took some of the elements of the legacy main tab and moved that to the parameters tab and combined that with the additional info tab. So now you're getting all your more set and forget fields in one tab instead of having to go between two different ones. Then you have the resources tab. This replaces the unit and people tab. As we have grown and increased our market diversity, we have alienated some by the hard-coded solution of operator and oiler. And so that we are trying to make it a little more universal, as well as future functionality in this tab will support more than just units and employees. The estimates tab, this is estimated billing from the legacy screen. And this is just a revision of the user experience. We also have the storage tab, which for those that have that turned off, that is still able to be turned off and set system defaults if you're not using it. And in-house comments. In-house comments works very similar to what it is today, but we did make some improvements on that. And then down at the bottom here, we have job level specific functionality. So you can see job related certificates, e-ticket status report, and attachments are all here. And I want to highlight attachments. And for years and years, everyone has seen the lightning bolt in the top right. It was a three-phase icon. It would go from gray to yellow to red. Same concept here. It's, attachments is file links. In fact, if you click on this, it's going to take you to that legacy screen. But we're using a paperclip since that is a more universal icon for attachments. And it also has badging. So it's going to give you a count of how many records that you have in there. So going back to the main tab, in this top left section, we're starting with just that, I'll call it admin information, where we capture the company, yard, and department, as well as the job number. And then it goes into a separate section for salesperson checked by and taken by. And then you have the purchase order, the status, and the audit fields. In the middle section, you have all the customer information, followed by description of work, comments, and if required, your date management in the top right, and your related information in the bottom right. Now, another advantage to WPF was the introduction of dynamic resizing. For many of you, you've struggled with that over the years as far as, when you try to widen a screen, it doesn't widen the grid, or it doesn't widen the fields that you're hoping to widen. But with WPF, it now does that. You can see that all the controls move according to the width and height of the screen. And I can maximize this so I get the full view, and that's just going to expand everything out to the maximum possible. And I can also shrink this. Now we are limited on the horizontal here in this version. We've tightened this up a little bit in a later version, but this should support anyone using a screen resolution of 1366 by 768 or larger. Sorry for the technical part, but just wanted to highlight that. Now, getting into controls here, before I move on to the next tab, I want to highlight the individual controls that are in the top right. So we have the diskette, which I think has been the universal save icon for eons, which is now in the top right here, followed by settings. And settings, you may be familiar with from Legacy, where you have the save screen layout. We've revised this a bit. We now have save screen layout on exit. So whatever you do while you're in the job, if you have this enabled, it's going to save, or it's going to remember the positions that you did. This can be column widths. It could be the columns that are being presented, or the screen size, or any other details about the screen. It's going to remember that. And then we also have lock navigation menu. Now this was introduced primarily to focus on, as you adopt this new screen and new approach to NexGen, you're going to need to get familiar with what all these icons represent. So you can enable lock navigation menu, and that's going to keep this in place as you move throughout the job. So you have that name to icon reference. Once you get more comfortable with it, you can hide that, and now you're going to maximize real estate for data entry and seeing all the information that you need. Additionally, if you just want to peek at these tabs, you can always click this icon in the top left, and that's just going to overlay it over your existing fields and show you what those values are. And as soon as you click out, it's going to go back and go away. All right, next up is the refresh job details. Now, in the past, we've had the refresh icon in the button toolbar, but all that did was refresh the controls. It wasn't all that intuitive. So we decided to take it a step further and give you both options. Now you can refresh the controls, or you can refresh the entire record. Refreshing controls is going to work exactly as you know it does today, but the refresh record is actually going to refresh the job in its entirety, without having to leave the job and go back or close out of the screen and reopen. It's grayed out right now because I don't have an active record open, or I haven't saved it, I should say. But once it is saved, then I'll be able to click on refresh record, and you can see that we also have keyboard shortcuts enabled for those. To the left of the bar here, we have the overflow menu, and for anyone that's been using Atom, you're familiar with our icon for the overflow. It's just the ellipsis, or the 3 dots. And when you click on this, this is going to be more your controls that are used a lot less often. For example, new job, copy job, print documents, your record navigation, and deleting a job. So as I progress through this job, I will show you the additional functionality of these options. And let's see. So before we navigate from this tab, I'm going to fill in these required fields. And I'm just going to pick Andrew as the salesperson. And I'll select the reported by, or report by, and Dan Johnson. Hopefully everybody noticed that yellow background. Just want to highlight that. So in WPF, we have taken the approach to highlight any field that needs to have a value in there in order to save, but does not have a valid value in there, it will turn yellow. And that is in addition to the asterisk that is applied to the left of the label for any of those required fields. So if I were to remove the value from any one of these asterisk fields, it'll turn yellow. With the description of work and the comments and the equipment required, you're all familiar with these having rich text capabilities. That is still the case today. Let's see, I'll put lift and set. Let's try lift and set as directed, and I'm going to misspell directed. So now you can see we have spell check in there, and I can right mouse click on here, and I can either go to spelling, or I could select the predefined one according to the dictionary library. and lift and set as directed. Now it's corrected. I can also expand this. In the past, when you double click in this field, it's going to open in a new screen. And in order for us to bring our system into compliance or more aligned with Microsoft products, we decided to change that functionality. So instead of double clicking to open up the expanded view, we now have this icon in the top right. So I can open this in a new screen or a new window. And now I have full rich text controls, and I can put in as much as I want. I can also expand this to see all the content if needed. Now, for the why we got rid of the double click to open the window is to better support quicker modification of information within the field. So everyone's familiar with a single click. Wherever you place that cursor and click once, that's where the cursor is going to go. If I double click, it's going to highlight the word that I double clicked on. And if I triple click, it's going to highlight the entire string. That way, if I'm doing a Control C, Control V, I can very quickly access that information and get it where I need it to go. And that applies to all text fields. We also took a more verbose approach to our labeling. Hopefully people appreciate that. Instead of saying job no or PO no, we have expanded that since we have the room to work with. And then in this, the related information area or the metrics section, this is going to give you a count of various details about the job. So you start with a quote, and it's going to show you the quote number if it came from a quote. Purchase orders, if you have 5 or 6 purchase orders on this job, it's going to show you that. And you'll be able to access another screen, which we'll show later. For the tools, same thing. As you add tools to this job, this is going to give you a count of tools and give you quick access to the tool screen. Storage items works the same way, but that's going to take you to the tool or the storage tab. And latest invoice and invoice history, this is based off of when someone generates an invoice. The most recent invoice is going to show the date in this section, where if I click on the hyperlink, it's going to take me directly to that invoice. Or I can look up invoice history so I can see all invoices created for this job. And it's going to give me a bunch of details, which I'll go into later. And then the last section I want to highlight on the main tab is the date section. So with WPF, the date and time controls are far simpler to work with. If you recall from legacy, we have a separate date field from the time field. And in WPF, we were able to bring those into a single one. So hopefully that reduces the number of keyboard strokes or clicks that you have to do in order to achieve the same thing. And this, the logic for this is really quite intuitive. So if I put in a date here, I can put in a time, whether that's 8 a.m. You can see up here where it goes to 8 a.m. And out of the box, it's going to know, it's going to recognize military time. So you don't even have to change anything on your system in order to use military time. But if you do change your system time format to military time, it's going to pick that up. So it'll always display your times in military time or 24-hour clock. So if I tab out of that, it's going to pick that up. Also note that it changed the to date immediately. With the WPF screen, we're not allowing you to accidentally get reversed dates. So if the start date is after the end date, it's going to automatically update the end date to be the same to avoid those weird situations. Additionally, we have this calendar view. Now, although you can't actually click on the calendar and interact with it, you can view in a more visual fashion what that job's date range looks like. So now I can see that I'm working from the 15th to the 30th, how that looks from a weekly perspective. I'm working weekends, as I can see, because these are highlighted. And if this is a multi-month job, I can still navigate from month to month and see how that is affected. When I get to the parameters tab, you'll see where we control the work weekends. And when you uncheck work weekends, then these weekend highlights will go away. We still have the date flexible and the time flexible. However, we have changed the logic on that. It's no longer going to allow you to enter a job without having a job time. The reason for that is in the past, we've had many cases where a job was created and then could not be found after the fact because it wasn't showing up on the schedule. So we're going to impose that we capture a date that may not be the actual date, but at least it's on your schedule and you can adjust as needed as you get more information about the job. Let's see, now I got to do some cleanup here because I missed a couple of details. So in the past, on the legacy screen, when in certain fields you could double click in order to access the master record information, we found that that wasn't intuitive for many users. So, years after using the system, some users were still not aware that they could double click to access the master record. So we added this icon here at the end of the drop downs. If I click on this guy, it's going to pull up the master record for that customer. And I can do whatever manipulation needed as long as I add permissions. And when I save it, it would apply. Additionally, if I needed to add a new customer, a new bill, job site, or any of these, I can create new ones from here as well. Can still look up customers just as we have in the past. And we have modified the mapping. A lot of you have questioned the mapping approach that we had in the past where it was integrated into the application. And we took your comments and hopefully we've improved it. So now when I click on this, instead of opening a NexGen, it's going to look at your browser or your default browser, and it's going to open it up either in Google or Bing, depending on your preference, which there's a separate screen where you can set that. So you can see that it put the marker directly on there, and it's no longer giving you the route from the yard to the job site. Instead, it's just going to give you the point where that job site is. Since Google and other mapping web applications have the ability to do directions, it gives you more flexibility as far as starting point and end point. So we thought we'd leave it to them to do that. All right, and one more thing before I get off the main tab is I want to show the search capability here. So in the past, when you enter in a job number, if you're not exact on that job number, it's just going to give you a message and it says this job does not exist. Well, we wanted to give you a better experience than that and give you the tools immediately that you need in order to find what you're looking for. So if I type in a job number, I'll go with 14659. That may not be an actual job in the system, but when I tab out or hit enter, I'm not going to save this job. It's going to immediately take me into the search screen and show me all jobs containing 14659. So now for all of you that use the prefixes, like the alphabetical character or the alphabet characters that precede the job number, now users can omit that and just type in the number and still find the job that they're looking for. Saves them a lot of keystrokes. And double click on it, and then it's going to open up that job. And we've added that same capability to several of the view by options in the lookup screen. And I will tell you now that that lookup screen that we just viewed is not the final lookup design that will be implemented for WPF. That was just an initial solution, and our product team is working on an even more refined solution for you. All right, so now that I went through that, I'm going to start by going through a job, a very simple job. Already got some default values populated here from set system defaults. I'm going to fill in the required fields. Let's go with Emily Mortensen again. I feel like that's relevant to a lot of our customers. Select an actual project that they have here. Some contacts. And we'll say lift and set for mechanical units. And I'll select the date range here, just a couple of days. And my default times, which are being set from set system defaults, are already here. If I want to adjust it, I can always click in to adjust it, or I can use the calendar and time control. So if I wanted to change this to 7:30, I just click on 7:30 here. Jumping into the parameters tab, this is, most of it's going to be set by default, hopefully for most of your work. But in the event that you do need to make changes, you're going to be able to do it in one spot for all these admin pieces of information. For example, job type, majority of jobs are going to be hourly, at least for most of our customers. And so right now that's set as the default, but I have access to all of them here. Industry code. This is actually a new field to the job screen. As many of you are aware, we've had it at the customer level for a number of years, but we're finally getting it into the job screen so that it can be leveraged more frequently and more precisely as well. So in this example, I just included some SIC codes here, and then their descriptions, but you don't have to use SIC as the standard for industry codes. You can use it however you want. Terms and conditions pulled in automatically, just as in legacy. This is a rental job, so we won't worry about the lease terms and conditions. We're doing a rental billing type, no retainage, and we have the options of signed contract, certified pay, OSIP, work weekends, and MSHA. If I mark certified pay or OSIP, you'll see icons pop up on the header, so that whenever you're in a job, even if you're not the dispatcher or the salesperson, you will quickly realize you're dealing with a certified pay or an OSIP job. If I uncheck work weekends, as I discussed earlier, you can see that granted, I should probably select beyond the weekend here. You can see that the weekends are no longer highlighted. It's going to automatically factor out the weekends for you. For the property information, which was on the additional info tab, it's now on the parameters tab, and we've added the logic that automatically pulls in the owner's information, same as customer address. So you don't have to retype that information when that does apply. Next, we have the project column, still the same project number, union, and all of the other fields here, they're all the same as they were in legacy. And then we have the checklist, which again was legacy and is used with Atom. This is a multi-select, so I can choose which ones I want to select, and I don't have to select any. Jumping into the resources tab. Now this is a drastic change from legacy. So hopefully everyone appreciates the work that went into this. So to add a new resource, we've got the icon in the top right here, it says add new resource. And we also have keyboard shortcuts. So you have Control A to add a unit, just as it was in legacy. But for employee, we decided to go with Control E instead of having you select from a dropdown once you added that record. So I'm going to start by adding a unit here. And notice that this is a single row. This should help in managing the number of records a lot better by reducing the number of rows that each record takes up. So you still have access to your various schedule types. And I'll just pick a truck here. Truck, I kept it very simple for the demo, so I apologize if there's a little less relevance there. And perhaps this is just a delivery, hypothetically. So it automatically pulls in the job date range. And to add employees, you can expand the unit so that you can add your employees as needed. Now, this is equivalent to taking in legacy, you have the unit record and then you have the employee record. Once you have the employee record, then you can map the employee to the unit record. So this should alleviate that step in the process. All I have to do is expand this and click here to add new item. And now I can choose from all of my employee records or employee types. In this case, it'd be a driver. And then I can select from any one of my drivers to populate the resource. And of course, the dates are here as well. I can also add comments. And if I want to display other fields, for any of you that are like, where'd the pickup column go or the return to yard? They're still here, but they're not as common. So we decided not to show them by default. If you do enable them, and I apologize, my comments column is wider, so they were sticking out pretty far. If you do enable them and you have the save screen layout on exit, it's going to retain that information. So there's really nothing lost in that approach. It's just by default, they're not going to be displayed. Additionally, with our nested grids, we also have the ability to show and hide various columns here. So if my organization does not like to use comments, I can always hide that, and that's going to reduce the amount of real estate being consumed. Same with talk to. If you're a big fan of the talk to option, it's still here. It's just not going to be enabled by default. So now that I have an employee here, I can delete the employee if I wanted to. And this, a lot of people ask, well, why would you have a delete button right there? Aren't you worried about, accidentally deleting? What we did is we added a delay to it. So you would click on, if I just click on it, nothing's going to happen. You can see that red circle start to form, but it's not deleting. I actually have to hold it until it completes before it'll delete that record. Additionally, we have the availability. So availability was always available, or it was a button that just said avail in the legacy screen. And now it's this icon here. It takes you to the legacy screen just as before. So if I click on it, this is what you get. The next one is email. So I can email a specific employee, or I can email everyone that is associated with this unit. I have, so this would email Linda specifically, but if I had 2 or 3 people associated with this unit, I also have this email group button, and this is going to pull in, either one will pull in the email address of that employee. Granted, Linda here doesn't have an email address, but it would show up in the to block there. This next icon or checkbox here, this is the primary resource checkbox. Now, the reason we introduced this initially is because we needed to ensure that we had reverse compatibility with the legacy screen. And if you were to open up a job created in WPF in legacy, you would have to be able to view it in the same manner. So this essentially maps to the operator field in legacy, or the operator column in the legacy unit people tab. So you have to check this checkbox in order to issue an e-ticket, because it has to know who is the primary employee for this e-ticket. So that's the purpose of that checkbox. And in a future release, that will be checked automatically for the first record, and then you can adjust as needed to save you that step. All right, we also have specifications and telemetry. Specifications replaces the lift info. So as I said earlier, trying to support more of, or be more universal in our market support, we decided to rename that from lift info to specifications. But this also allows for unit-specific lift information or specifications. And this is a combination of the lift info tab with the daily tab. For any of you that are familiar with the daily tab, I know it wasn't commonly used, but those that used it extensively. And so this really brings the best of both worlds because you can manage it all in one tab. And if I add a record here, I can select the date, the start date, the end date, and put in all of my information, rename these column headers as needed, as has been the convention. And I can actually put in multiple records here. So if I have a lift information that's specific for day 1 that may be different for day 2, I can put in all that information into this screen so that it'll pass to the e-ticket appropriately. And the telemetry tab, this was previously called the, I think it's the unit miles, which was the grid at the bottom of the legacy screen. And this we've added more functionality to. Still probably only going to be used for those that have GPS and dealing with bare rents, but for those that do use it, I think it would be a lot of value. So if I enter in values here, it's going to tell me that that the source was NexGen. But for any of our GPS interface customers, it's going to tell you if that value came from your GPS interface instead of NexGen. So you're now going to have that information. Additionally, if you're doing the GPS interface, you can also pull in the latitude and longitude of where that information was recorded. So that's the layout of the nested grid there. In addition to the unit, we also have the employee record. I can add that at the job level, or as we went over, the unit level. And it's often asked, well, why would we assign it an employee at a unit level versus a job level? Well, oftentimes you may have an operator and rigger, or an operator and oiler, plus a signalman or a rigger or some additional employee, but they're not directly tied to the unit. Having them at the job level keeps them off of the operator ticket if you were doing the job-based tickets, and you could send 2 separate tickets if you wanted, or of course you have the LEM where you could include all 3. But it just gives you flexibility in what you feel is right for your organization. So I'll go through that delete option here. And I'm going to save it real quick. Notice it caught that there was no salesperson there. So I'm going to throw in Andrew and hit save again. Start date cannot be blank. So it's catching all the validations. I didn't put any values in here, so I'm going to have to get rid of this record. And I hit save. It caught me in a loop here. Oh, no. Delete this guy. Okay, so this message, 1 or more resource records have conflicts. Just like in Legacy, where you got the pop-up for every single record in the Unit People tab, this is going to do a validation across all the records that you have in the resource tab, but it's only going to give you this one message. You're no longer going to get N number of messages based off the number of resources that you have. Instead, we are going to display an icon here where you can hover over it and see what that conflict is. And this is going to persist. So instead of it going away when you close the message, you're always going to have access to this. So in this case, it shows that the schedule overlaps for Linda with another job, and it shows me the date and time where the conflict exists. Now, this is also going to catch you certification conflicts, unit conflicts, employee conflicts, if they're starting before the job, ending after the job. So it's going to capture all of that, and it's just going to list out every conflict that exists. And I can, at any point, run a manual validation to do the same thing. So on save, it's only going to look at your modified records and run the validation. But if I click on the validate resources icon, it's going to do a full audit of all the resources you have in the job. And it's going to list out all the issues that you're running into. Okay, now that I have it saved, you can see I now have a job number here. And we can move on to the estimate tab. And I'm just going to pick I didn't account for a truck here. So I'm just going to pick tractor counterweight for 4 hours. So again, same approach that we had on the legacy side. We decided to simplify this, keep it a single row. If there are more columns that you prefer to have access to, you always have access to them in the column chooser. We didn't take anything away. We just made it easier for you to manage what content you need to deal with. And I will highlight that anything in gray is disabled. You can't hide them. And the reason for that is that all of these values are required in order to save the record. So if you were to have it hidden and you didn't put a value in there and you try to save it, you're going to get an error and not be able to see where that error is occurring. So we're not allowing you to hide those. All right, enough with this job. Let's jump into a more complex job here, and that is 14659. Again, it's running that conflict check there. And here's the job. So I didn't type in the full job number because you can see it. It's M-14659. I just typed in the job, the numerical portion. So I'm going to select that. And let's take a look at the main tab. So here's a much more complete solution. I've added the description of work, the comments, all the information is filled out there. Resources, we've got a 110-ton crane with a truck and a flatbed trailer based off the scope of work. And then we also have the estimate tab. Now this estimate is intended to highlight what we did to the sub-items capability. Sub-items were, before you would go in a linear fashion, top to bottom, and basically sum up to your summary line. And today, you start with your summary line, which in this case is mobilization, and you can add all the billing codes you want under that, and they're all going to subtotal to an amount, which displays on your summary line item. So a lot better layout so that you can easier manage, the groups of codes there. And if you do have a long running one, we always have the filter for each of the columns. I can narrow down the billing codes to a specific one, or I can set any of these parameters in order to filter out what I'm looking for. If I selected 110 ton, now it's just going to show that one, or I can clear out that filter and it returns everything here. For generating an estimate, we decided to simplify that as well. So instead of having to go into the file links or attachments here, now you can go directly from the estimate tab, and you have access to the different estimate templates that you have in your system. So I'll go to detail estimate. This is just going to run through real quick and generate that PDF. And now we have the estimate here. This is automatically being saved in the attachments. And you can see that went up from 3 to 4. So if I click on that, you can see the attachments here. And we also have the ability to view e-ticket status report, but that will be, we'll demonstrate that in the next webinar, and job-related certificates. So for anyone that has adopted the job-related certificates in the legacy, this is the same concept, just with an icon instead of a descriptive button. And it lists out all the relevant certificates for this job based off of the relationship between the customer, the unit, and the employee. All right, so let's go into more detail on the metrics section. This is another job that I created, basically the same job, but I decided to go into more detail. If I go back to the main tab, I have a purchase order. If I click on purchase orders, I can see information on this purchase order for the header information, and you can see I have a lot of options for displaying in this grid, or I can expand this down so I can see the detail items. This was a rigging PO from lifting gear hire, so I've got those parts here. I can see the quantity ordered, the cost, the amount, GL account, the class, and anything else from this list that you want to choose. You'll be able to display that. And for you administrators, you still have ability to constrain or limit user access to certain columns if needed. If I wanted to look specifically at this PO, I can click on that same go-to icon, and that's going to open up that purchase order. And I can see the details of that purchase order. For the
David,
invoicing,
just to jump in, David, real quick here, just a time check. We got about 5 minutes left. Just wanted to give you a heads up on that. And just a reminder, if anybody has any questions, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. Please remember or feel free to submit those questions so we can address those when David wraps up here. Thanks, David.
All right, thanks, Kyle. All right, so the last piece I want to show you on the main tab here is the invoice portion. So if I click on the latest invoice here, notice it's highlighted as a hyperlink here. It's going to take me directly to the invoice, or I can go to Invoice History. If I go into Invoice History, the first record that's going to show is just going to be the header level information for that invoice. And again, just like the purchase order, I can expand that down to look at the details of that invoice here. I can even tell if billing has emailed that and when it was sent. So it gives me a lot of information about the invoicing. And this invoice history count here, it shows 1, but if there were 15 invoices for this one job, it would show me 15, and they would all be available in that drop down, or that new window that popped up. The last section I want to touch on, since I am short on time, I talk too much, is the in-house comments. So let me go back to the other job because I had prepared in-house comments there. So in-house comments, the default is going to be much simpler. It's only going to show comments in for invoice out of the box, but you can still choose all the columns that we had in the past as being exposed as needed. Notice that the first one here I created, and the second one Kyle created, and I can't delete this comment. I may be able to modify this comment, but I cannot delete it because it's not my comment. So if I decided to, say, John S requested instead of just John, and I save that, if I go into the modified by, it's going to show me that I modified it even though Kyle created it, but I can never delete it. I'm not allowed to delete it because it's not my comment, and the intent of these comments is to cover, cover all your bases when it comes to accounting for details of the job. I can, however, delete mine. And I think that is it. I think I ran over my time anyway, so I'll hand it back over to Kyle.
No.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, David. All right, so we're gonna do some Q&A. I'm gonna go through the list here. We got quite a few rolling in. I'm gonna start with one that should address a lot of the questions, and it's a pretty obvious one. When will this be available? We are beginning to plan the rollout phase for all customers. Just a general piece of information here. When you do receive this update, this screen will not automatically turn on. It is in your set system default. So don't panic if you get an update and don't feel you're 100% ready to use the new screen. The legacy screen will still be in place. Obviously, we encourage using as quickly as possible, but there is some time to make sure everyone's ready to go. So if you want to contact your CSM, and we'll be getting out a schedule very shortly here in terms of when you'll be receiving that update.
Can I expand on that, Kyle?
Please do. Yep.
All right. So for those of you that have customizations, I'm sure that is going to be a lingering question. Are my customizations going to be included when I get this, when we get this new screen update? And the short answer is no. There are some exceptions there. Some have been incorporated by, just by default because we thought it was a good, something that we could introduce for everyone. Others are very specific to a given customer's requirements and would not benefit the larger group. So we have to take into consideration how that's going to be implemented. In some cases, we have to discuss with the customer how it needs to be integrated or whether or not it's still relevant. So there are ongoing conversations across the customer base for those that have customizations, and we need to see what we need to do in order to get them incorporated. So back to you, Kyle.
Thanks, David. Okay, I got one here. I think it's a good one that came in. Will billing codes and mapping to ERPs be affected with this new screen? In other words, the transactions that are sent to the accounting systems, is there any impact there? Oh,
no. Nope. This is using the same data model that we have in legacy. It's not going to hurt the interface between accounting.
Thanks, David. If there's a unit type auto configuration set up, including the estimated billing, will that follow through in this new format?
Yes, it will follow through. It's not going to be optimal initially because we have to update the unit type default screen, or I'm sorry, the maintain unit types screen, in order to support the nested structure that we've incorporated into WPF. So when you use the unit type defaults initially, everything's going to come at one level, and then you would have to drag and drop them into position as you saw fit. So it would basically mirror what we had in Legacy, where it's all at the top level. But if you want to refine it to nested levels, you can do that. And by drag and drop, no more of that click here to move this line and then double click and then click here. Yeah, we did away with that and added drag and drop.
Okay, let's go into the list here. Will jobs that are created in the legacy screen be available in WPF when it's turned on?
Yes, yeah. The backwards compatibility was definitely taken in consideration. So any job that was created in Legacy will be available in WPF, and vice versa.
Okay. There's a couple questions in regards to, will the quote screen be updated at the same time as the job screen? And what is the impact to Adam? Dave, maybe you can talk a little bit about the higher level plan for WPF in 2021.
Sure.
Very high level plan.
Yeah, as far as the quote screen is concerned, there's not going to be any immediate change to the quote screen. That's another challenge that we face for the unit type defaults, is even if you have the unit type defaults or the maintain unit type screen redone to support this new layout, we run into the conflict with the quote screen. So we have to figure that piece out. So no immediate changes to the quote screen. And as far as Adam goes, we've also done extensive testing to make sure that it's compatible with Adam. And you shouldn't have any loss of functionality there. If anything, you're going to see some minor improvements on the Adam side. However, you will still have the exact same experience when managing jobs in NexGen or in Adam as you have today. So even though NexGen may display in a neat nested grid structure, you're going to have the same card layout that existed before on the Adam side, at least for now. Did that answer the question, Kyle,
Okay.
you think?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dan.
Okay.
I'm just looking through some other questions here. Quite a few came in. There's one. Would you be able to, in the nested view on the Unit People tab, are you able to put a trailer in the nested bundle with a truck as kind of the secondary there?
That is a good question. And that is not possible right now. However, through the transition to WPF, we did make a change to the data model so that we could support that in the future. We started out with the relationship between the employee and the unit, which you guys will see later this year with the e-ticket redesign, how that's going to benefit. But that exact same data model, we structured it in an abstract form so that we could further support a relationship from unit to unit, unit to checklist, unit to tools, that sort of universal relationship structure. So it is on the horizon, but I couldn't give a timeline for that introduction.
Okay, and then for our customers that have multiple yards, is it possible to have the new screen turned on in one yard and the old screen in a different yard?
That is not an option. No, it's the control is in set system defaults, so it's going to affect the organization in its entirety. We don't have a yard by yard capability.
Yeah, that's a good question. I know some of the larger customers will have some challenges there. So we'll obviously work with you and have a rollout plan and some options there as potential ways to make sure that transition goes smoothly. How will this work with bare rentals and auto billing?
Should be no impact on bare rentals or auto billing. We still, I guess it wasn't demonstrated very well, but we do still have the rate 2 and rate 3 columns. So it should support that just as it did in Legacy.
Okay, can a tax line and fuel surcharge line be added to the cost estimate sheet and also be able to select areas they can be applied to? So is that percentage for those specific billing codes? Nothing changes there, does it, David?
No.
In terms of how those work?
No, no change.
Same functionality.
Yeah.
Okay, we got quite a few questions, guys, so I'll try to get to a couple more here. And like I said, we'll be following up with those we can't get to. A question about the actual billing, like we have in the legacy screen. David, is that still available to see kind of the history of your invoices and the summary versus the detail view?
Yeah, that's in the invoice history pane. What I demonstrated, I believe it was one of the last things I demonstrated. That is the equivalent to the actual billing tab. So you're going to get your high level or your summary lines by default, and then you can expand one or more of those rows to see the detail of each invoice.
Okay, and then there's one around weekends function. Is this still grouping Saturday and Sunday together, or is there a way to kind of segregate between the two if you maybe have a Saturday only situation?
As of right now, it's still grouping Saturday and Sunday together.
Okay, let's do one more here, and then we'll wrap up. Trying to find so if you make the changes to the status of the job and any dates and times in the main tab, will that still follow through over to the unit people tab?
That's a good question. It is going to require more time than we have remaining in this webinar in order to cover in detail, but the short answer is no. The dependency between the job time, date and time, and the unit date and time has been removed in favor of a different logic on the resources tab, which we'll get into in the next webinar.
Okay, I think that's a perfect segue. So again, I'll follow up and get these questions answered. Thanks everybody for submitting them and obviously for joining today. We appreciate that. So just to wrap up here, I'm going to talk about some of the support tools available. And I need to share okay, I'm sharing. The webinar has been recorded and it will be sent out following this call. So you'll get a link to the recording if you want to go back and listen. There is a WPF dispatching guide for the job screen. There's also an admin user guide that will be included in that email that you'll have access to, also available on our website. As part of the survey, we're going to be asking about small group training sessions. So again, this kind of ties into conversations with your CSM and our support team. We'll make sure that everybody has everything they need before we provide the update, before we turn this on for you, so everyone's feeling good about it and fully prepared. So as always, please feel free to reach out to your CSM or to our support team. And just to give a little more information on that second session that David just mentioned, that will be scheduled on April 14th. It will be recorded again, so hopefully everyone can attend, but if not, we'll have that recording available. He's going to focus on the issuing of job tickets and LEMs, some of the logic changes that he just mentioned with the carryover from the main tab to the detail, some of the trucking elements. So we'll wrap up and kind of finish up the dispatching responsibilities in that second session on the 14th. Okay, well, thanks again, everybody. I appreciate everyone taking some time today, and we'll look forward to talking to you on the 14th for part 2. Take care.